Why does God, a good and perfect, loving God, allow suffering in this world? Suffering is part of human existence from birth until death. And every person will go through suffering, be it physically, psychologically, socially, or spiritually. The Bible provides many examples, such as facing one's own death or the danger of death, or even the death of children or friends and family members. It talks about homesickness, sterility, or even persecution, mockery, scorn, loneliness, and abandonment. Watching the wicked prosper and the just suffer, the unfaithfulness of spouse and friends, and the misfortunes of one's homeland. There is no one answer to the question of suffering. But when daring to suggest some reasons why God would allow suffering, let us remember that Jesus, who is God with us, also endured the worst of physical, psychological, social, and spiritual suffering. As he was abandoned, he was beaten, he was imprisoned, he was scourged at the cross and crowned with thorns and forced to carry the cross and then crucified. So here is a non-extensive list as to why God sometimes allows us to go through suffering. Number one is charity. Sometimes God allows suffering to bring about an important good. Suffering allows a person to lay themselves down and put others before themselves. For example, when a pregnant mother chooses to forego cancer treatment in order to save their unborn child. Number two is humility. Sometimes suffering can bring us closer to what is good and take us away from obstacles that stand in the way of our happiness and joy. It can cause us to turn away from evil and embrace strong relationships with others and with God. Only when we are weak do many of us rely on God. The third thing is transformation. Suffering can transform us into saints as it draws us closer to Christ. We can see this in the lives of many saints, including Saint Francis of Assisi and Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who through their suffering turned to Christ, found their vocation, and found their true joy. The fourth thing is punishment. Sometimes, and certainly not always, we can cause suffering ourselves. For example, binge drinking and waking up with a hangover, or speeding on the road and causing an accident. This could cause injury. And sometimes we have to suffer the consequence of our wrong. Of course, not all suffering is the consequence of our action. For example, take the suffering of Jesus. He was entirely not at fault. Though we don't believe that God causes suffering, we do hold, however, that God will use our suffering if we hold on to love. Although this list is by no means extensive, I hope you can catch a glimpse of the fact that God can cause something good to happen out of something that is fundamentally bad. It's been an incredible few days here in New South Wales, having attended a men's conference and then songwriting, and now this afternoon at a school outreach and getting ready for a parish concert very soon. In conclusion to this understanding of suffering, even though you might, or you people you know might be going through suffering that seems to never end, always remember that suffering and pain is temporary. It is temporary because Jesus died on the cross to save us from eternal pain, to save us from hell. And this, Jesus on the cross, is the perfect example why a good and loving God would allow suffering.